And we are live. All right, awesome.
At home.
Boom. Michael, thank you for being here. You got Michael Hellickson with Club Wealth, coach extraordinaire. You've got almost 80 coaches working with you now. Hope you guys are staying safe out there, out in Seattle or Washington area. It's a lot going on right there. There's enough stress, to be able to jump on today and know what's going on over there. So wanted to just kind of, bring you on here to kind of talk about what, a couple things we could do to be successful as agents. And you've got a couple of giveaways you're going to do. And I've also followed your podcast for quite a few years. Every time you do something, you've got an item of value that you give away at the end. And one of those, I was looking at an old email a minute ago, and it was about the Home Partners program. And you had an agent on there. And I just hired an agent to my team who does Home Partners. So I'm like, oh, crap. All right, perfect. I can send this over to him so we can add that as an item of value, that he can learn a little bit more because he's very successful with Home Partners. Yeah. But we're happy to, it was cool to see that again and push it out there.
That's awesome. Home Partners is a great program.
Yeah. And they just came back after COVID. So they're just opened back up Orlando, Daytona. And it's an awesome, deal to have because anybody who can't buy, we can still buy. And if they don't like the house, we get paid again,
Yeah.
Total beauty of it.
It's a super program for the agent. There's no question. And it's a great program for the consumer too. I mean, the short answer is it's great for everybody. It's a win-win. And the nice thing is I'm pretty sure Home Partners is not trying to get the real estate agents out of the business. I think they're okay keeping us in. Yeah. I like that about them.
Well, the fact they don't take any of our money when we close the deal is the best part. We're still making our 2.5%, 3.5%.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. They're good partners with the industry. So glad they're out there. So,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So let's get started. Let's dive in.
Well, we were talking, our topic today is the 3 habits that separate uber successful agents from and brokers from the underachievers. And here's the reality. There really are. There's 2 distinct main groups. There's some subgroups, but there's 2 distinct main groups of agents and brokers out there. And that's those that are super successful and those that aren't. And there's not a lot of difference between them that can't be overcome easily if you simply put your mind to it and you figure out how to implement these 3 habits. As an example, our average coaching client right now, our typical coaching client right now does about 200 transactions a year.
Wow.
Right. And what's interesting is that's typical, right? That we've got agents that are doing, 3,000 transactions a year, but very typically they're going to be right around that 200 mark. And it sounds like a big number for a lot of people. A lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I just want to do 10 transactions this year. Or I just want to do my first transaction, or, how do I get whatever from where I am now to my next 100 transactions? Well, I'll tell you that these 3 habits, they are the exact same habits that will get you from 0 to 10, that will get you from 100 to 200 or 200 to 500 or 500 to 1,000 or more. When I was selling real estate, I was doing 120 to 180 transactions a month. And I had about 750 listings in active and pending status. I implemented these 3 habits at a high level. I wasn't the smartest guy in the world. I wasn't the best salesperson in the world. I'm still not. I just implemented these 3 habits and I got very serious about the consistent application of these habits. So if you're okay with it, I say we just dive right in and start talking about them.
I mean, if you see me turning in my head, I'm making some notes here. So let's how we can all learn and earn.
Well, and I'm going to recommend that everybody, if you don't have it already, grab a pen and paper and be prepared to take some notes because we're going to go really quickly through this stuff. And it sounds like it's only 3 habits, but there's a lot of depth to each one of them. Yeah. And I'm going to give you some scripts and some dialogues and some strategies that you can use within these habits to ensure that you are also implementing them at a high level in a way that doesn't take you away from your family. Now, that's probably the most important thing that I can share with you today. So grab your pens and write this down. Our core value at Club Wealth is that no success in the world can compensate for failure in the home. So write that down. No success in the world can compensate for failure in the home. I share this because this industry chews through relationships if you let it. It'll chew through families. It'll chew through you. And it'll certainly chew through marriages if you allow it to. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so my suggestion is, as we're making our millions, and I'm all about helping you make millions of dollars, but as we're making those millions, let's remember, if we think and if we believe and we want it to truly be for our families, then we have to be congruent with that. And we have to be giving our families the time and effort and focus they deserve. And so it's not enough to say, oh, I work 80 or 100 hours a week for my family. No, that's not for your family.
No.
They don't need to work in that.
I'm one who grew up in this industry with my parents both selling, and they were always around, and my wife and I are partners in the business. So it's like I've found the leverage, or not the leverage, but the balance. But sometimes I lose the balance. Like 9 o'clock, I'm on a laptop or something. But the way to do that is to leverage other people, and I'm sure you're going to dive into that. But it's like the assistants who can help with doing the paperwork, doing all the other stuff, so you can quit at a certain hour.
I've been a big believer in coaching for all of my adult life. My very first coach back in, 1991 was Mike Ferry.
Okay.
And I always like to give credit where credit is due. While I do believe there's some limitations to that program, I will give credit to Mike for teaching me a lot. In particular, probably the best lesson I learned from him was that if you don't have an assistant, you are one.
Yep.
And it's true. You need to. And the nice thing is, if I'm on a team, I get to leverage the entire team's assets, their assistants, the systems, the support, everything. I don't have to go buy those things or hire those people on my own. I can take advantage of that as a member of a team. So whether you're a team leader or a team member, I will suggest that you definitely need to be on or leading a team. In the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to get more and more difficult to be the Lone Ranger solopreneur agent out there. It's funny. A buddy of mine, his name's Robert Allen. He wrote, a bunch of best-selling, world's best-selling books and on investing in real estate and those types of things. But one of the things he always talks about when he says solopreneurs, he talks to them. He says they're not entrepreneurs. They're solopreneurs, right? Because they make less than business owners. And so that's what I want to hopefully share with you today is how you can use these habits to build a business so that instead of trading time for dollars, you can begin trading ideas for dollars. Instead of chasing business, you can begin attracting business. And so habit number one in accomplishing that is the habit of lead generation. Without this habit, every business, real estate or otherwise, would be out of business. The only way you can sell real estate is if you actually have leads. Now, some of you will say, well, I do business by referral. Great. That's still a lead, right? And by the way, if you do all of your business by referral and you refuse to go out and get other lead sources, you're going to experience challenges eventually as well. So let me give you some numbers. Write these down. 6 years ago, the average agent got 61% of their business from their sphere of influence, repeat, and referral clients. All right. So we'll just call it all sphere of influence. 61% of the average agent's business. Within 4 years, that number had dropped to 41%. And the number from last year, I don't have the official number, but I've been told that it's in the 30s. And so the number of transactions the average agent is doing by referral is dropping dramatically over time. And the question is why? Why is that happening? And so can you guess, Todd? What do you think?
It's a lack of, staying in touch. That's my assumption. But you've also got the internet out there where people are clicking on a new home, and then all of a sudden I'm on the phone calling them. Well, their brother's a realtor down the street. Didn't even know they were looking. So
you just nailed it, because the lack of staying in touch, frankly, that's been a problem since the dawn of time with real estate agents, right? So it's not just the lack of staying in touch. What it is now is it's the internet. So write these numbers down. 92% of all buyers start their search online. 92%. Now, here's what's really crazy. Hey, Todd, do you ever run into an agent that you're just thinking, you're in the middle of a transaction, you're like, why would anybody pick that knucklehead as their agent? Right?
Of course.
Okay, let me tell you why. I'll tell you exactly how and why that happens. It happens because 72% of the 92% work with the first agent they come in contact with that doesn't drop the ball in follow-up.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. You could be the biggest knucklehead in town, and as long as you follow up with them appropriately and you don't drop the ball there, you've got a pretty good chance of doing business with them. So the flip side of that is, if you are entirely reliant on referrals for your business, you may struggle in the coming years. So how do we avoid that? Am I saying that you shouldn't do business by referral? No, I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I'm suggesting that you should do more business by referral. In other words, you should enhance your referral-based business. But as you grow the number of transactions that you do by referral, I want you to make that a smaller percentage of your overall business. Well, how does that work? Because you're going to grow all of your other lead sources as well. You know, back in the day, I was getting 6,352 sign calls per month. Now, just let that sink in for just a second.
Yeah.
That's a crazy number, right? Well, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because we had 750 signs out there, right? But that was just one of 35 lead sources that we had in our business. And now we had all these other lead sources that were also bringing us business. So at a time, and I'm specifically referencing 2007 to 2011, when every other agent out there was freaking out, struggling. And I shouldn't say every agent. There were agents that weren't freaking out, but a lot of agents were freaking out. In fact, during that period of time, the number of transactions closed dropped by 20%. What's interesting is that between 2007 and 2011, the number of agents in the industry dropped by 25%. So think about those numbers, right? So all I had to do to be able to be successful, or at least just to survive in the industry, is just not quit. Right. Because I should be doing 5% more transactions at that point if I just don't quit, because 20% of the agents got out of the business. And so I'm sorry, 25% of the agents got out of the business. And so that said, during that time, I had diverse lead sources. Agents that were entirely reliant on their referral-based business, many of them went out of business during that time. And those that had diversified lead flow did not. And now, flip side of that is a lot of agents transitioned from retail business into REO business during that period of time. And a lot of agents are thinking right now, should I be doing that today? And I would suggest this.
That's a good question.
Right? It is. And people are wondering that right now because they see it on the horizon. They can feel that, hey, look, this can't last forever, right? I mean, this is too good to be true. I mean, here we are on the longest bull run for real estate in my lifetime. In fact, in recorded history. And so the question is, will it continue, or will you end up in an REO market again? Well, the answer is it really doesn't matter. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're diversified, you'll survive. If you're not diversified, you'll struggle. The agents that switched entirely over REO, yes, they had a great run during 2007 to 2011. But guess what happened in 2011, 2012? A lot of those REO agents, what do you think happened to them, Todd?
Well, you know, I was at an REO convention in Dallas in 08, and I was talking to a guy. He goes, I don't even want to deal with the retail customer right now because they're either overpriced or this or that. And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, you know, while we're all trying to attract that business, I don't want to let that person go because, you know, people that we sold then are buying and selling now again for the third or fourth time. And if you let them go, guess what? They're not my client.
That's right.
So they focus too much on one thing. And I think that was my problem then too. I was trying to focus on too many things where it was like, okay, let's just focus a little bit of REO, this, a little bit of this. And then, you know, because you're trying to do anything to survive during those days, you know, to keep going so you don't quit.
And so here's the key. And well, what happened is a lot of those guys that switched over entirely to REO, they're not even in the business today.
Right.
I mean, I know a lot of agents that personally that were good friends of mine and still are good friends of mine, but that are no longer in real estate today. Why? Because they got so focused on REO, they did exactly what you said. They dropped all that retail business. And when the market shifted again, those retail clients had already found other agents to work with. And those REO agents did not have the same volume of transactions that they once had. So that said, what do you do? Because the flip side of this is also true, Todd, as you mentioned. What happens if I go out and I get tons and tons and tons of different lead sources? Now I've got my mind in 10 different places, right? Here's the key. Write this down. It's 3 things. You're going to automate, you're going to delegate, and you're going to eliminate. So what does that mean? So I'm going to get a lead source. I'm going to automate that lead source to the extent humanly possible. Then I'm going to delegate everything that I can't automate. And then I'm going to eliminate all the waste in that process. Once I've done that, now it's on autopilot. Now all I have to do is literally go grab another lead source, because all I'm doing with that initial lead source is I'm just doing follow-up and conversion on that. And I don't have to worry about any of the lead generation anymore. Now I've successfully begun to transition from chasing business to attracting business. And that's the goal. And so ideally, if you want to run a solid 6-figure business, you're going to need roughly 10 to 15 lead sources to run a solid 6-figure business. To run a 7-figure business, you're going to want between 25 and 35 lead sources to run a solid net 7-figure business in and year out.
So you mentioned earlier you've got 109 potential lead sources, and that's like crazy to think in my head, because I for a little bit I was trying to like take a yellow pen, like write all the places down we could find leads at, and I think I got to like 30 or 35, and I'm just enthralled to find out what this 109 is. But if you had all of that in, I mean, that's going to give you the 6,000 homes a year, because you got to have like the mega team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and here's the thing. It's easier than people realize to do this, right? People think, oh, I got to go out and do it all at once. No, you don't. Yeah. Every 3 months, the goal is every 3 months, I want you to add another lead source. Okay. If you do that every 3 months, you'll be blown away at the results, and you'll be blown away at what you can do long-term. The problem is everybody, generally speaking, human beings tend to overestimate what we can accomplish short-term and underestimate what we can accomplish long-term. Well, if you want to have massive results long-term, start dialing in your lead sources now, automate, delegate, and eliminate those lead sources. Get that funnel working for you so that those leads are funneling right into your sales team, whether that sales team is just you or whether it's an actual team of people. You need to have those funneling through in an automated fashion. You want to have automated drip campaigns helping you follow up, and then you want to follow up properly.
Right.
So that said, when it comes to those 109 lead sources, you're right. There's 109 that we refer to our clients. Of those, I'll tell you what I'll do. It looks like you've got the number at the bottom of the screen there. Those of you that send a text message to 727-287-5993 right now, if you text the words Club Wealth to, again, it's 727-287-5993, what we'll do is we'll send you 31 of our best 109 lead sources. If you do it right now while we're live. If you wait until after the show, we'll still give you 17 of them. But if you do it now, we'll give you 31. So that said, let's go to habit number 2. Let's assume for a minute that you guys have lead generation just on lock, right? So what's next? If I've developed the habit of daily lead generation in some form or another, and again, you don't have to make cold calls or FSBOs or expired calls. You don't have to do any of that garbage if you learn to do some of this other stuff. Or if you enjoy those things, that's fine too. They work. But again, those are just examples of lead sources. But there's online, there's referrals, there's all kinds of other ways. So let's assume that you've got lead gen figured out. It's interesting. If you look at our industry, we all know of Zillow and Realtor.com, and these two companies came about, and there's others similar to them. But these companies came about because they figured out that the one thing real estate agents suck at most is lead generation, right? So what did they do? They went to all the MLSs and they said, hey, give us your data and we'll advertise your listings for you and we'll send you leads, right? And all these MLSs were like, well, gosh, if we're not on that, everybody else is going to be on that. We better do it. So we're gonna jump on board. We're going to give you all our data. And so we did. We gave them all our data, which, by the way, was the strongest power we had in real estate was our data for so long. But we'd given away our data to these companies, and what did they do? They took that, and they didn't just give us the leads back. They sold us the leads back that came in from our data. Well, that's all fine and good because a lot of agents say, well, gosh, now I don't have to learn how to market. Now I can just, write a check and get leads. And that's fine and good. And yes, you can make a lot of money on those leads, but the ROI is a lot lower than a lot of other lead sources. Write this down. There's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. One is ROI, which is return on investment. So I want to make sure that when I spend $10 on a lead source, so let's say $1, if for every $1 I spend on a lead source, I want to get a minimum of $3 back. I prefer to get $8 to $9 back for every $1 I spend on a lead source. Now, my ROI on a lead source like a Realtor.com or a Zillow is going to be far lower than it will be on something like a pay-per-click or Facebook ads or sphere of influence or anything else for that matter. But there's another factor that you have to consider, and that's your cash conversion cycle. Write that down, cash conversion cycle. And so why is cash conversion cycle so important? Cash conversion cycle is important because if I get low ROI on a lead source, I'm probably getting fast cash conversion cycle, right? The reason they charge more for those leads is because those people are ready to buy or sell sooner than other lead sources. But if I want to get higher ROI, I'll generally have not always, but generally will have a longer cash conversion cycle. So that's the time it takes from the time I get the lead till it turns into a paycheck for me, right? That's your cash conversion cycle. So like a Realtor.com or Zillow might be a 30 to 90-day cash conversion cycle for a good chunk of their leads. Certainly there will be other leads that you'll get from those sources that might take a year to close or even more. But by and large, you'll be in that, somewhere in that 30, 90, 180-day cash conversion cycle. With a source like a pay-per-click or a Facebook lead, I'm going to be more like 12 to 24 months in my typical cash conversion cycle for those leads. But my ROI will generally be at least 2 to 3 times as high with pay-per-click or Facebook leads than it will be with Realtor.com or Zillow. So I make a lot
in place.
That's exactly right. You just nailed it. That, by the way, is habit number 2. Habit number 2 is lead follow-up.
Yeah.
Right? And you just nailed it, Todd, because the thing that most real estate agents don't do well, and Realtor.com and Zillow figured this out, right? They figured out the only thing that we suck worse at than lead generation is lead follow-up, right? Enter Zillow Concierge and OpCity. Now
enter 40% referral fees.
Exactly my point. And we wonder why there's so much downward pressure on the commissions, right?
Right.
Because we're so willing to pay for people to do our job for us. Look, if you guys want to make a ton of money, you're going to have to learn to market, and you're going to have to learn to follow up with leads. Yeah. And you're going to have to make those habitual and do it outside of these companies. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't buy their leads as a part of what you do. You just need to understand that if that's all you do and you become dependent on them, you can end up like one agent I know in Virginia who had 331 reviews on Zillow at one point. And he had his Zillow rep told him, hey, go ahead and every time you have a closing, take your laptop with you and have your client fill out a review for you at the closing table. It's the best time to get a review, right? Well, he did that. And Zillow came to his team one day. Actually, they didn't even tell him directly. They told his team, they said, hey, we deleted your 330 reviews and we removed you from Zillow, and you are now banned from Zillow for a year and a half because we believe that you had a bunch of fraudulent reviews in there.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yep.
Didn't give him the opportunity to prove that they were real. He even said, look, you can call my clients. I'll give you, go and you've got all their names. I'll give you their contact information. Call them up. Ask them if it's a real review. Nope. Zillow wasn't interested. And this guy was at the time spending 15 grand a month on ads with Zillow on LinkedIn, right? And gone instantly. And by the way, it was 61% of his business was Zillow.
Oh,
so
geez.
Overnight, he lost 61% of his lead generation. Why? Because he hadn't followed my advice to diversify his lead flow. Had he done that,
started putting stuff on Google for that reason.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Had he done that, had he diversified his lead flow prior to that, he wouldn't have had a problem, right? It wouldn't have been a big deal. So so I lose one lead source. I'll move on, and a year and a half later, I'll have it back.
Right.
But he put all his eggs in one basket, and it hurt him bad. So that being said, don't let that be you.
Right.
So, all right, that said, so lead follow-up, we've got to get good at lead follow-up. So let's talk about what does that look like? What does really great lead follow-up look like? First of all, you got to have fast speed to lead. There's 2 components to lead follow-up: speed to lead and tenacity of follow-up.
Okay.
So your speed to lead needs to be quick. And Todd, can you guess how fast we need to get to a lead today?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Now I will tell you, and everybody says 5 minutes. Everybody always tells me 5 minutes. And that was true 9 years ago when help me out here. Harvard Business Review came out with a study 9 years ago that said if you don't respond to your leads within 9 minutes, then your chances of connecting with them drop by 900% after 5 minutes. So what we found since then, I've got a client in San Diego, California. His name is Jesse Zagorski. And Jesse has an ISA on his team, or had at the time, an ISA named Benson. And I called Benson up and I said, Benson, we're going to do a little test of our own. I said, I want you, every single time a lead comes in, I don't want you to look it up. I want you to hit send on your phone, and I want you to get on the phone with them every single time within 30 seconds. And while you're on the phone, I want you to be paying attention to, and I want you to count how many other agents contact that person while you're on the phone with them. Because people tell you, they're like, oh, looks, I'm getting another call from another agent, right?
Right.
And he came back 2 weeks later. He had tracked all his numbers. He did a very good job, got on the phone with everybody in the first 30 seconds. And I asked him, I said, so how many other agents contacted that person in the first 5 minutes? And his response was 4 to 5 other agents contacted them in the first 5 minutes. So can you guess what my advice to him was if he wants to eliminate the vast majority of his competition?
Go ahead.
Keep the person on the phone for 5 minutes.
Okay. That's what I was. That's what someone had done, because like we get the referral companies or we get like the Zillow, transfers or something, and when we call and it's busy, and we learn that's the trick. If you can get them on the phone first, keep them on, have the questions. I mean, have 10 or 20 questions, just keeping them going, and then I'm going to give up because if I got to keep calling them.
And not only you, but most agents, the vast majority of agents will not make more than one phone call to that person. So if they make the initial phone call and they don't reach them, they will never, by and large, they will never follow up with that person again, which means you've just eliminated more than half of your competition just by keeping them on the phone for 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, that's a huge one. All right, so now let's do this. Let's talk about it. So what's the speed that we need to get to? 30 seconds is the minimum number, I should say the maximum number. You've got to get below 30 seconds. Number one buyer of Realtor.com leads in the country is a guy named Robert Slack. You're down in Florida. You know Robert.
He's in our market.
Yep. Robert buys $12 million a year in Realtor.com leads. $12 million a year. Just put that in perspective for him. This is a real estate team leader. He's buying $12 million of leads in Realtor.com leads a year. He'll do 6,000 transactions this year. And his speed to lead is 16 seconds. So their average is in the first 16 seconds, they're on the phone with the person. Yeah. That's a big deal. Now, here's the next thing you have to understand. What are the ways that I follow up? Let's assume I get my speed to lead to an appropriate number. What are the ways I need to follow up? There's 6 ways. Write these down. One is I got to call, email, text message, video email, video text message, and my personal favorite, Facebook stalk them. All right. So I always like to tell people stalking used to be a 3 to 5 year sentence. Now it's a 6-figure income. So you gotta stalk, man. I mean, it's literally, if you don't stalk them on Facebook, you're missing the boat, because that's where most of them are. But what you don't know is how they like to communicate. So we're going to communicate with them on all these different methods until we figure out what their preferred communication method is. Now, that being said, what if I get a lead in? What do? I call them right away, right? What if they don't answer the phone? What do I do next?
They don't answer them, and that's when I'm going to send the text. I'm going to send the video and the email and get all that stuff out there.
You're close. That's what most people would say. That most people would say, "Well, I'm going to leave a message, then I'll call, I'll text them or whatever."
Call again.
Not yet. I'm going to give you the secret right here. Let me tell you. Write this freaking down, you guys, because this is it right here. This is the money right here. If they don't answer the phone, I'm going to immediately hang up, and I'm going to do what we call a double dial. Double dial, right? Oh, we got somebody watching on Facebook says 90 seconds and follow 3 times a day for 3 days. I want to know who that Facebook user is.
I know. I wish it said the names.
Somebody is listening, and somebody knows about double dial too. Somebody's been listening to me somewhere else, because this is the Club Wealth rule of 3. We're going to get to that in just a second. So before we get to the Club Wealth rule of 3, what I want you to first do is I want you to do the double dial. So that means if they don't answer, I'm going to hang up the phone. I'm going to call them right back. I haven't left a message or anything yet, right? If they don't answer the second time, I'm going to hang up without leaving a message again, and I'm going to call them back. Oh, it's Daniel Betancourt. Of course it's Daniel Betancourt. He's one of our Club Wealth coaches, so of course he knows. That's like having the professor in the classroom listening. Right. And he's like, oh, let me just tell you, student teacher, this is how it really works. Thank you, Coach.
Yeah.
That said, Daniel's a stud. And by the way, Daniel's one of our leaders in our Spanish-speaking coaching program. Freaking love you, Daniel. You're an awesome guy. That said, after I've hung up twice because they didn't answer, then I'm going to send a text message. Now, write this down. You guys have to get this text message right. It's 3 words, and it's super simple. All you're going to do is you're going to text them. Is this whatever name they registered with? Is this Susie? Right? And I will tell you that more often than not, you're going to get the following response. Yes, who is this? Now, let me tell you what's happening in the mind of the consumer at this point, right? So they don't know who you are. They get a call from a number they don't recognize, and especially if they have children. Think about this. They get a call from a number they don't recognize. They don't leave a message. Then they call right back. They don't leave a message. And now they're sending a text saying, is this so-and-so? If you've got kids, you're thinking to yourself, dude, one of my kids is either in jail or in the hospital, depending on which kid it is, right? And so they're interested at this point. They want to talk to you. They want to find out what the heck's going on. And so what we do at that point is we send another text message that literally 83% of the time gets them on the phone. You ready for it? 83% of the time.
This is sheriff or officer.
No, but I like that. That would probably work pretty good. Yeah. No, it's not deceptive at all. It's very simply calling you now.
Okay.
That's all you do. Calling you now. Now they're really freaking out, right? Now they're like, oh my gosh, what is this? I better pick up the phone. 83% of the time they will pick up the phone. And look, I don't care if it's a no. Give me the no now before I follow up with you for 4 or 5 months, right?
Right.
Give me the no now before I waste another minute on you. Or give me the yes and let's do something. All right. So
let me interrupt on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, if someone says that and then I pick up and I realize it's a salesperson on the other end, now I obviously clicked on an ad, so that's why you're calling me. But what is the conversion rate or the percentage that you're able to keep that person on the phone of that 83%?
That depends entirely on the agent. Okay. That depends entirely on the agent and their skill set. So everything up until this point requires absolutely zero skill, and all it requires is just the right habits. Once you get them on the phone and now you're communicating with them, that's when you need to learn some sales skills. And you don't have to be great at it, but you have to what we call brot, right? Brot is the German word for bread. It's B-R-O-T. And it's an acronym we use that stands for building relationships on trust.
Okay.
And so we got to get into rapport with them, right? The problem is most agents, the first thing they do when someone says, hey, I want to see that house, the first thing most agents do is they say, hey, you need to get pre-approved or pre-qualified, right? That's the worst thing you can do. That's sales prevention 101. Stop it. Stop that garbage. That's not going to help you. And it's certainly not going to help them. We're in a service industry. I'm going to show you how drug dealers are smarter than real estate agents in about 3 minutes here. And I've never done drugs, so before y'all go there, I'm not that guy.
I just studied with them.
Yeah, right. No. But the fact of the matter is, they are in some ways smart. In one way in particular, smarter than real estate agents when it comes to our next habit. We'll get to that in a second. First of all, when you do get that person on the phone, what you do need to do is you need to give them value, right? They called you and you're in a service industry. Give them value. Think about Gary Vee. He talks about, what is it? Jab, 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 right hook. Or I'm sorry, it's jab, 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 right hook, right? So it's value, value, value. Then you go for the close. Think about this. Todd, have you ever been on a blind date?
It's my wife.
Okay, so that was your first blind date?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this, and this I may regret asking this. I don't know. So when you went to pick her up on this blind date, you've never met her before. You show up on her doorstep. You knock on the door. She answers. Did you dive right in for a kiss?
No.
No, you didn't. Of course not. What did you? You took her to dinner. You brought her flowers. Maybe took her to a movie. You showed her some value first, right?
I don't know if this is the whole date went as a sales pitch, but hey, I like the way it goes. It
probably felt very similar to that, right?
Yeah.
So, but you brought her value and you developed a rapport with her. You got into rapport by developing that relationship on trust before you even attempted to hold hands, let alone going in for the kiss. Here's the problem. Most real estate agents with most of their prospects are trying to make out with them on the front porch before they've even taken them out for dinner. Are you freaking kidding me? And you wonder why your production sucks. Right. You wonder why the guy next to you is crushing it and you're struggling. Let me tell you why. Or let's say you've got Susie sells a lot of homes over here and she's crushing it and your production is not as good as hers. I'm telling you why. Because Susie's giving people value before she asks them for anything.
Right.
Stop asking for things until you've delivered value. All right. That's it. I get pretty worked up about that. Quit trying to make
makes for a good laugh too.
What's that?
Makes for a good laugh as well.
I know, right? I was teaching a seminar a couple of years ago. I had a gal in the front row. I kid you not. It was so funny. She's, I don't know, probably my age, 40, 50 years old, somewhere in there. And I was describing this. Dude, without hesitation, she's like, well, that sounds like a great date to me. I'm like, whoa, okay. She was a little more aggressive than I was used to. But kind of crazy. All right. That being said, habit number 1 is lead generation. Habit number 2 is lead follow-up. So can you guess? Oh, and wait, we haven't talked about the tenacity of follow-up yet. So let's talk about Coach Betancourt and the Club Wealth rule of 3. So we're going to follow up with them in those 6 ways we discussed as tenaciously as possible. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to reach out to them, write this down, 3 times a day for the first 3 days, 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks, 3 times a month for the next 3 months. And right now, people that are watching this are like, what the heck? Are you crazy? Listen, if you think that's too much, look at your production. And if you're doing fewer than 120 to 180 transactions a month, I want you to try it my way for a little while. All right. Now, if you're doing more than 120 to 180 transactions a month, I would like to coach with you. You tell me how you're doing it. Until then, you need to try this. You need to do it my way. All right. Because it works. I promise you it works. It's not rocket science. It doesn't require an uber complicated drip campaign or artificial intelligence or ISAs or any of this other garbage. And I'm not saying those things don't work. I'm just saying you don't need it in most cases right now. Is there a time in your career where those things will be helpful and help you take it to the next level? Yes. But right now, let's capture as much as we can. Let's capture the big pieces of the pie that are available to you right now. And then we'll use those other things later on to get those little pieces of the pie that still remain. All right. So 3 times a day for the first 3 days, 3 times a week for the next 3 weeks, 3 times a month for the next 3 months. Now, here's the other thing you got to keep in mind. If I get a hold of them on my first call, I'm not calling them 2 more times today. All right. Let's use a little common sense here. All right. All you do is piss them off. Like, don't do that. So I want them, as soon as I get a hold of them, I want to schedule my follow-up appropriate to the conversation. Now, generally speaking, that means if they tell me they're not going to be ready for 6 months, I'm cutting it in half and I'm calling them back in 3. Okay. So no matter what, I'm going to cut their time frame in half and I'm going to call them then because I want to always ensure that I'm not dropping the ball on my end. And by the way, how would you like, Todd, do you think these guys would like the #1 follow-up script we use across the board in Club Wealth that we have the most success with?
Anything that's going to help them close, we want to provide that value back to them.
All right, here you go, guys. Write this down. Best follow-up script on the planet. Instead of calling people up and saying, hey, are you ready to buy? Are you ready to sell? Right? That's super self-serving. The only thing that's more self-serving and worse than that is when people call them up and say, oh, by the way, if you were thinking about buying or selling a home or had a friend or family member who was, do you have a realtor you'd refer them to? Now, if I catch you using that cheesy freaking script, I'm booting you out of Club Wealth. Knock that crap off. It's totally self-serving and nobody appreciates it. So I'm sorry. That just drives me nuts when I hear that garbage. So what should you do instead? When you call them up, it's very simple. All you got to do is just say, hey, Todd, it's Michael Hellickson, man. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't dropping the ball on my end. Right. That's it. And what is Todd going to say 9 times out of 10? 9 times out of 10, he's going to say, oh, no, Michael, it's not you, it's me. It's like that girl in high school, right, Todd?
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, right? It's always, no, it's not you, it's me. And they now you've put yourself in a position of being a servant who cares instead of a sleazy self-serving salesperson, right?
Well, you're coming to them with value, basically. I mean, like the whole conversation is, primarily bringing value back to them. And, because if you don't follow up, if you say that it's 3 to 6 months, so if I do the 6-month follow-up and not the 3-month, then they're going to be looking at it on Facebook. They're going to click the house. Someone else is going to call them. And then and you didn't realize that they were ready sooner.
That's right.
They were just waiting for the right one.
But it starts with bringing value, right? It's all about them. It's not about you. If you want it to be about you at some point, make it about them now. And yes, there you go. Daniel just
Danny, so he's our commentator on the back end. So
I freaking love that guy. Seriously. Yeah. Thank you, Daniel, for being engaged. I appreciate that. Everybody else is sleeping over there. They're like, this guy, he's pretty boring. I don't know. All right. Daniel, he's like your picture. Who is that in the background? Is that a picture of Daniel on your wall behind you there?
Yeah, that's Daniel after a good meeting.
I love it. All right.
Close another one.
Dude, he's like, what? No way. All right.
Jack Nicholson.
It looked like, I was thinking that might be Jack. That's all. All right.
Anyways.
That's freaking hilarious. That's a great picture, by the way.
Yeah.
All right, so check this out. So habit number 1 is lead generation. Habit number 2 is lead follow-up. Who can guess what habit number 3 is? I've got these leads. I've followed up with them. I've nurtured them over a long period of time. And by the way, if I've done that for 3-4 months, I'm the only person left. Nobody else is even calling them at this point.
Right.
So I get to that point. I'm the only natural choice. What's left to do? Now I've got to Yeah, I got to close them. I got to convert them into a client. Well, how do I do that? Lead conversion is habit number 3. So how am I going to convert them? This is where drug dealers come in, right? This is where drug dealers know better than we do how to convert. When a real estate agent meets a client for the first time, they try and get them pre-qualified or pre-approved. When a drug dealer meets a potential client for the first time, what do?
Sample the product.
Absolutely. They say, write this down. First one's free, then you got to pay, right? And what do? They're getting you hooked on their product.
Right.
That's all they're doing. They're getting you hooked on their freaking product, and before long, you got to have it, right? So let me ask you this. Real estate agents, what is your product? What are you selling?
Service.
You're close. It's not houses. It's not service, but that's closer. What else?
You got house service. Lost me.
It's you. Okay. You're the product. Todd, you are your product. And you need to give people the opportunity to sample the product, right? You got to give them the first one free, then they got to pay. So what does that mean? If you call me up and you've got a pulse, you want to go look at houses, let's meet. I'm setting that freaking appointment right now because I know that like most people on this planet, and Todd, you correct me if I'm wrong, do you sell better over the phone or face-to-face?
If I can get in front of them, I'm going to be a lot better at getting the conversion.
All day long and twice on Sunday. You need to be Jerry freaking Maguire in the living room, right? Like you just got to get in there and you got to get face-to-face with them. And so stop putting them through hoops before they get face-to-face with you. The thing that you got to do, the thing that super successful, uber successful real estate agents and brokers do, is they get face-to-face with people. They go for the appointment as quickly as possible. Now, that being said, don't rush it if you are not in rapport yet. But as quickly as possible after you're in rapport, you want to get to that appointment. And as an example, when you're making your phone calls, when you're tracking your numbers, stop worrying about how many calls you make. Stop worrying about how many contacts you have. There's only one number that matters, and that's how many appointments did you set today.
Right.
I would suggest that if you want to make a solid 6-figure income, you need to, at minimum, set 1 appointment per day, 5 days a week. That's your goal. 1 appointment per day, 5 days a week. You get to Saturday morning. If you don't have 5 appointments set that week, guess what you do? You set more appointments. Now, I will tell you this. On my team, the number is 2. The people on my team who set appointments to go show houses, they say, so our buyer agents, they are setting a minimum of 2 appointments today, 10 appointments per week. And guess what? The closings show, right? The closings are proof of that.
We have in our team. It's like, you got somebody who's picking on the phone up 100 times a day is going to be, and it's not even our team. It's any team. The ones that don't answer the phone or don't do anything, or I don't know that number, I'm not going to answer it. They're going to only close 1 or 2 houses every 3 months versus the guy that's on the phone, a person that's making the calls, or whatever the number is that's coming in, you're answering it. And if it's spam, hang up.
That's
right.
That
could have been that opportunity.
That's right. Here's the challenge with people that focus on how many calls they make per day.
Right.
They won't set as many appointments because all they're thinking is that the subconscious, you got to understand the difference between the conscious and the subconscious mind, right? Subconscious mind is far more powerful than the conscious mind and cannot tell the difference between reality and what you tell it to believe. So if I'm constantly programming my subconscious with, I got to make more calls, I got to make more calls, I got to make more calls. When I'm on calls, all I'm thinking about is I got to get off this call so I can make another call.
Right.
When my focus is on how many appointments have I set, when I get someone on the phone, my focus is how do I get an appointment with this person? So you've got to get the appointment with them. That's, by the way, credit to Coach Luigi Caprio, who's one of our coaches and has been for many, many years, that helped us really understand the importance of this. And when we started applying this across the board in Club Wealth, people's numbers started shooting through the roof. It's huge. All right, so lead conversion. I got to get face-to-face with them. Now, there are ways that you can do this that are a little bit more advanced than others. There's some neuro-linguistic programming techniques that you can use, or NLP techniques that you can use that we value a lot. My favorite is a closing technique, and I'm going to share this with you guys. When you do get face-to-face with somebody, let's say you're on a listing appointment as an example. Do you have a line that you use every time when you want them to sign the paperwork?
If everything sounds good, let's get started.
Okay, that's great. And Todd, I'm stoked that you have a line because most people don't. Most people are not prepared with that. And I will tell you that whatever, in fact, if you guys have a line that you use when you're asking someone for their business, type it into the chat right now. If you're on the webinar, type in the chat. If you're on Facebook, type it into the Facebook feed. But I want you to type in, what line do you use? What script are you using to ask for their business? If you're not using one, type in, I'm not using a script. If you are using one, type in what that script is. I'll tell you this, on a buyer appointment, I would recommend the following script. On a buyer appointment, I would say, at what price would this be a great deal for you?
Okay.
It's not a yes or no question, right? It's a very open-ended question, but I want to know, at what price would this be a great deal for you? And if they say, you know, if it's a $500,000 house and they say $250,000, what am I going to do? I'm going to write it up for $250,000. Why? Because I want to make darn sure that I'm getting them on paper. I want to make darn sure that they're writing things with me. I want to get them in the habit of putting pen to paper with me. I want to get them signed on a buyer agency agreement with me. That's a lot easier to do in the middle of writing a transaction up than it is as a standalone ask.
I think you made that connection as well. Once you start putting pen to paper, they're going, if it doesn't come together, they're going to be more loyal in the next one.
That's exactly right. And so now I use that as an educational process. I help them understand what does need to happen to ensure they don't lose the next one. And I don't get frustrated about, oh, I'm wasting my time writing an offer that's never going to go through in a market where there's 20 offers on the house.
Right.
And so, by the way, in that process, when they tell me that price that's 50% of value or whatever, 50% a list, I'll tell them, I'll say, okay, so that's fantastic. I'm excited to hear that. And I'm going to do everything I can to get it for you at that price. So what I've done now is I've shown them I'm on their side. First thing I've done is I've shown them that I'm on their side. Now, next, what I'll say is, so Todd, let me ask you this. What's more important to you? Is it more important to you to get this house at that price? Or is it more important to you just to get the house?
Right.
And then he gets to determine what his priority is, right? And if he says, well, I don't really love the house, but, you know, I'd buy it at $250. Okay, great. Let's put it in writing and let me see what I can do. I'll go to bat for you.
You're getting commitment at that point, even if it's not the house that they want. They're willing to, you know, do something with you.
That's exactly right. And they're one step closer to a deeper relationship with me. So that said, if I'm on a listing appointment, there's another script that I use. The listing appointment script that I really like for closing. Now you got to look at your screen. If you're listening to this on audio, you're missing the best part of this particular script. But for those of you that are watching on Facebook or elsewhere, I want you to look at my eyes when I do this. So at the end of my listing appointment, after I've explained everything to them, gone through my 44-point listing appointment checklist and all that, then I will say, are there any other questions before we get started on the paperwork? And I shake my head.
We got Danny at the bottom there again.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. So I say, are there any other questions before we get started on the paperwork? And guess what they do virtually every time? Nope. Where do I sign? Right. And you go right to paperwork. Now, sometimes they'll have a question. And here's another place agents drop the ball frequently. If they have a question at this point, sometimes they'll say, well, yeah, what about, you know, and a lot of times if I've not done my job right, if I've done my job right, if I've covered everything in the listing presentation, they shouldn't have objections at this point.
Right.
I've resolved all of those with my presentation already. And any question they ask at this point, I'm going to take a red pen out and I'm going to write in red ink on my presentation the question that they had so I can change my presentation, my checklist for next time to ensure that I resolve that concern before someone can ask it. So that being said, let's say that they say, well, yeah, well, will you cut your commission? Then I immediately hit them with, nope. Are there any other questions before we get started on the paperwork?
Just always go for the close constantly, because that's a common question right now. You know, you're at 5, 6, 7%, and will you drop it? And that's always asking. And we always we want to make sure we stay in the house. We're like, sure, let's just get signed. So you've got to go and be firm with the no, and show, because if you haven't provided your value or shown your value.
That's right. And here's something people don't realize. Usually when people ask that, it's not an objection. It's just a question, right? Don't confuse objections with questions.
Right.
Most of the time they're just asking because they kind of feel like they have to, right? I mean, truly, right? People feel like, you know, they're a schmuck if they don't ask you to cut your commission.
Right.
And so the first time they ask me that question, I'll brush it off with a nope. Are there any other questions before we get started on the paperwork? Now, if they ask again, it's a legitimate objection, right?
Right.
Well, then they might come back with, no, really, you never cut it. Won't you cut it? Or, if they dive deeper on that, then I'll say, well, let me ask you this. And I'll usually have 3 or 4 different ways I can handle that objection. And by the way, this is a great exercise for you guys. Every objection you get, whether from a buyer or a seller, I want you to start writing those objections down. And then what I want you to do is I want you to start learning at least 2 to 3 objection handlers for each and every one of those objections. I want you to memorize those objection handlers so it's top of mind, top of consciousness.
Right.
So that anytime somebody hits you with it, you already have a comeback right now. And if they hit you with it again, you've got a different comeback. And you've got to have these objection handlers structured in a way that it appeals to different personality types, right? There's the high D objection handlers. There's the high I objection handlers, if you're familiar with the DISC profile. A high D objection handler is, nope, are there any other questions before we get started on the paperwork? Okay. A high I objection handler is, I can understand how you might feel that it would be appropriate to reduce the commission. I felt that way once myself. What I found is, so I go into a feel, felt, found objection handler, which, by the way, is another neuro-linguistic programming technique. That's a great technique to use with a high I. Another thing you can do if you know you're working with a high D, probably the best way you can handle those objections, if they don't respond to the nope, then you can say, well, Todd, as I'm sure you already know, if an agent is not strong enough to negotiate for their own commission, how strong do you think they're going to be negotiating for the price of your home?
Right.
So, but what I hit him with in the beginning of that was, as you probably already know, that's the phrase that you use when you're dealing with a high D. Because they all know everything. High Ds know everything, right? You're never going to convince them otherwise. So agree with them, acknowledge that they know everything. And then they will not want to disagree with you because then they're wrong. So, all right. That being said, there's lots of fun ways you can deal with this, but remember that closing script. Are there any other questions before we get started on the paperwork? So that said, Todd, I know we're running out of time. We've only got a few minutes left. What else do you want to make sure we cover before we wrap up today?
I noticed you guys have, I appreciate you coming on, doing all this. There's a lot of great takeaways. And Danny, thank you for dropping all the information in the comments. I was able to type one as I was taking notes as well. We've a lot of great content here, a lot of stuff provided back. I've been texting your service so I can get my 31 free lead service. So I make sure I do it during the show. So if I'm turning my head the other direction, I'm replying to your autoresponder with my name, my email. Love the system for the.
I love it.
You have a business strategy mastermind coming up November 18th to the 20th. Can you tell us about that for a little bit?
So due to COVID, we're giving 2 options for our next event, which is in November. I think it's the 19th through the 21st or something thereabouts. The website for it is clubwealth.com/BSM, and that stands for Business Strategy Mastermind Conference. And for that event, we are offering both an in-person and an online version of that event. So there's 2 different price points. If you view it online, it's a particular price point. If you view it in person, which, by the way, we highly recommend. Now, I get it. People are concerned about their health and their safety, and rightfully so, and I understand that. Rest assured that we are doing everything humanly possible to ensure the safest possible environment at this event. And I will promise you this. The networking that happens in between sessions at these events is world-class. It is second to none. The average attendee at our events is doing 200 plus transactions a year. Now, there are certainly new agents there as well. But where else are you going to get in a room with a large number of agents that are all doing, or the majority are doing, around 200 transactions a year? And all of whom are really nice. They're willing to share with you. We're very picky about our events. Like, we won't, I'll give you an example. If your idea of going to an event is heavy drinking, drug use, and going to the strip clubs, that's not us. All right. Now, I'm not going to judge anyone if they have a drink at the bar after on the evening of the event or something like that. But I'll tell you what, if someone gets sloppy at our events, we kick them out. It's adios, hasta la vista. You're not coming back. because we're there to learn and people are there to have a good time in safety, and they don't want to see somebody getting sloppy. They don't want to deal with that. Yeah, so I would recommend get there to the in-person event if humanly possible. And if
you've done a couple virtual events this year that were supposed to be in person, and it is so hard to sit on Zoom for 6 hours. And and I feel bad for my daughter who's home in a chair, in front of a computer for 7-8 hours a day. There's not getting up and walking around. It's like you got to be in front of the screen. You got 4-minute break. The virtual stuff, it's not me. That's why I like to go to an office. I like to go to events. I like to do the things because you can network and meet people. I think the way we met people this year was Zoom breakouts. So I'm writing the name down of who I wanted to talk with after the breakout session. It's a lot harder. It's more cumbersome, and it's not as intimate. It's just, that said, look, I understand that some people have some health issues that make them particularly susceptible and at risk when it comes to COVID and other stuff. And you know what? You should use your best judgment and do what's best for you and for your family. Well, I'm glad you guys are doing both the in-person and at home. Give them 2 options. Yep, it makes a difference. It really does. And the speakers. Our speakers are all practicing real estate agents, and just like our coaches, like every one of our 75, 80 coaches sells more real estate than the people they coach. Right. Likewise, our speakers are all ballers. They're all selling real estate and they're having success. We're not selling a bunch of stuff. It's not a big sales pitch at these events. In fact, if you want to find out about coaching, there's not even a session to teach you about coaching at these events. It's just it's just bringing value. It's nice. There's always that pitch, all right, guys, go in the back and sign up. You get something waived or whatever. We are not going to do that to you. We're not going to drive people to the back of the room in a big wave. And we won't do that. No. So, yeah. Anyway, that said, probably the last thing, if it's okay, Todd, that I would share is 1 time per year, we allow every agent in the country the opportunity to have a one-on-one strategy session with one of our actual coaches. Now we limit this to 1 time per year because we're doing, I think, 500 or 600 of these a month right now. So we do a lot of these strategy sessions, right? And it's a no pitch call. We're not selling you coaching unless you can ask us about coaching on the call, and we'll certainly be happy to tell you about it. But the purpose of the call is to dig into your business, figure out what's working, what's not working. Where are you now? Where do you want to go? What are you willing to do to get there? And what are you not willing to do to get there? And then what our coach will do is build you a roadmap for the next 12 months on what you need to do to be successful in the next 12 months and to move that needle towards your goal. And again, no sales pitch. And if you want to do that, go to clubwealth.com. And on our main screen there's a link for strategy session, or just reach out to clubwealth.com/strategy session, and you can schedule one right there on the website yourself. But we do ask that you please limit this to 1 time per year. See if I can get the link up here. Yeah. But it matters. And in fact, we're talking about Coach Daniel Betancourt. Coach Daniel does strategy sessions for folks that would like to do a strategy session. So he's a great example, and he is a smart cat. Let me tell you, you want to learn something, get on a strategy session with Coach Daniel Betancourt. He's a brilliant guy, and he's very happy to spend 55 minutes with you. Again, 1 time per year. So you guys are doing that. You give them that roadmap, and because you may not be the right fit. I'm looking for something different, what you're offering, whatever. But if we can get enough value out of that 1 hour, I'm definitely going to move forward to the next steps because you gave me a roadmap, but who's going to hold me accountable on the roadmap? And that's what and that's why people get, the number one reason I think people get coaching is 1, to learn more, but 2, the accountability. Well, I'll tell you, and for us, we offer a guarantee. We hold ourselves accountable. So we literally guarantee our clients, if you don't double your income your first year coaching with us, we'll give you 100% of your money back. Nobody does that. Nobody else does that, right? But why do we do that? Because it holds us accountable to making sure that you're getting the result you're after. Right. And frankly, literally, we've never once, not ever, had anyone ask us for their money back. Not once. That's saying something. So it's been very successful. And the expectation is if you're doing the simple things we're going to teach you to do, you should be able to double your income year over year. Up until you hit about 500 transactions a year. And you start getting into the 500 transaction a year range, you should still be able to increase by about 50% per year. The expenses go up from there. I mean, we're averaging 100 to 110 right now, and our goal is 220 next year. We keep wanting to double, and we keep pulling back. And it's like, all right, next 2021, we got to make that jump. So we're working on our plans right now to kind of push on that next level. Sounds like we need to do a strategy session. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah, definitely. We'll be booking it. I love it. Let's do it. Awesome.
Well, Todd, thanks for having me on. Man.
Yeah.
It's been great.
No, I appreciate it. Coming on, you've got a lot of stuff you provided back. I got 2 pages of notes. I got to decipher what they say. So I almost have to go back and listen to this again and get some clarity on my handwriting that I did.
I love it. That sounds like me. I've got worse handwriting than a doctor.
Yeah, that's about what it comes into. Yeah. You have to point out you're writing like, nope, this note's up here, that one's down there. Forget it. Well, that's why I love these are recorded. They're or not recorded. They're recorded now and back live, and I can catch it out again later. So and get the stuff there.
That's awesome.
Cool. Appreciate it, Michael. We're gonna end broadcast.